in case you didn't know, I'm Seaborn. I've been sponsored by DD for several years now, and like you said, I like to throw Hyzers. If I have an opportunity to throw a Hyzer, I throw a Hyzer. That's what I do. Just in case not everyone knows, a Hyzer is when the disc is going to follow the direction of the spin. When you throw a disc and it always comes back to a certain direction, which all of you should be familiar with, that's what we call a Hyzer. If that does that at any point in time in its flight, that's considered a Hyzer. But when you hear the term Hyzer, you typically think of a disc following that same direction the whole flight. So like if you throw a disc on one angle, it's going to follow that same angle all the way around. If I'm right-handed, like me, and I throw backhand, that disc is always want to go left. If I'm left-handed and I throw backhand, that disc is always wanting to go right. So it's the opposite. Same thing with sidearms. Right-handed sidearms always want to go right. Left-handed sidearms always want to go left. A couple of reasons why you should really learn to throw Hyzers is it's easier to be consistent on a regular basis. Yep. Everyone can learn to throw straight shots, and you need to learn to throw straight shots. But by throwing a Hyzer, you're taking a couple of variables out of the shot that don't need to be there. So let's say like here we have a wide open field, basket a couple 100 feet away. I can throw a putter straight that far. That's not a stretch for me. But by doing that, I risk flipping the disc over and it dumping, or not getting it on the perfectly flat line and it pushing out to the left. I also risk with the tailwind or headwind, the disc floating up and floating down. Whereas I can take a fairly overstable disc, something like a Latitude 64 Stiletto or a Dynamic Disc Enforcer, and throw it on a line, for me, right-handed, out to the right, and it's always gonna come back to the left. I don't ever have to worry about it not coming back to the left. So it's a lot more consistent the way you throw it. Just because you have a wide open shot doesn't mean you have to throw straight at it, like I said. And it's usually easier once you start learning to throw Hyzer up shots and Hyzer shots. You'll learn to pick distances. You'll learn that I want to land about 20 feet right of the basket, so it gives you an object like a tree or something in that vicinity to throw at. So you're not throwing necessarily straight at the basket and trying to land it in a certain area. You're throwing it to the right and letting the disc do the work. Does that make sense? And so it can be a lot more consistent. If you have a wide open shot, like I said, about 200 feet, wide open field, and you put 10 of the best pros in the world in that same shot, I would almost guarantee 10 out of 10 of them are going to throw a straight up Hyzer shot of some kind. The discs may vary, but that's what they're going to throw. So a couple ways we do that. It's pretty much the same grip wise and stance wise as your normal shots. You don't really want to change that too much. You tend to want to disc up when you're trying to throw Hyzer shots. What I mean by that is something more overstable. If you've got a disc that goes straight, pick something that hooks hard at the end for you instead of that straight disc. And basically the keys to it are height. You want to make sure your height is good, and you want to make sure the angle out of your hand is good. You don't want to release it on a big anhyzer angle if you're trying to throw a Hyzer shot. You want to release it on a nice soft Hyzer angle. So essentially what we want to do is grab the disc just like we normally would. We're not going to talk about grips or anything right now. Everyone's fairly comfortable in what they have. And height, like I said, is the key factor. You can throw a disc really low on a Hyzer line and it'll follow and it'll skip and run along the ground. You can throw it really high like a spike, and when it hits the ground it stops in its tracks. And there's a happy medium in between that most people feel comfortable in. So basically it's the same motion like you would want to throw it. Just grab it like normal, and when you throw it you just want to put that little touch of Hyzer on it. It's also really good practice for your normal shots. If you've ever listened to any of Eric McCabe's tips, he'll talk about this. He releases all of his discs with a little bit of Hyzer. The reason is it's easier to be more consistent if you're releasing the disc on the same angle every time and just choosing a different disc that'll do a different thing rather than trying to make a disc work in a way it's not really meant to. So you just kind of want to pick a nice soft angle, and some of you that may be sharper than others, some of you it may be flatter. It just depends on your arm speed. It's something you'll just have to practice with and work at. And so just like normal, you would just reach back and throw it just like normal. Typically with Hyzers, you don't want to throw them really low, 5-6 feet off the ground like you would some straight shots. You want to get a little bit of height under them, 15 feet or so, 10 to 15 feet. Let the disc fly. Because what the disc is actually doing is going towards the ground the entire flight. Like when you throw it, it's going to want to turn back towards the ground the entire flight. So if you throw it really low, it's going to hit the ground a lot sooner than if you throw it really high. It sounds complicated, it sounds kind of confusing, but as you practice it, it's really easy to pick up quickly. It's not something that's going to take you 10 years to learn and master. It's something that you can go out in the field for a couple weeks and practice, and you'll get to the point where you're fairly comfortable of knowing, hey, if I throw a disc on this angle at this speed, it's going to land there every single time. And consistency is the key. You've heard me say that a lot. That's why pros like to throw Hyzers when they can. That's why I like to throw Hyzers, because it makes me a more consistent golfer. Not to knock any of the other shots. You have to have every shot in your bag. But if given the choice, Hyzer is always a great option because you know what it's going to do. Couple different ways. I mentioned, throwing Hyzers as far as just flat, straight, let it come back. One of the things I wanted to talk about was spike Hyzers. That's something that you don't see a lot of amateur guys throw. And it's kind of a shame. Because it's looked at as a professional shot, because they see the pro throw this huge tall spike over these 80-foot trees and think, I can't ever do that. Well, you may not be able to do that. The shot is still very, very useful for you guys. How many times have you landed behind a tree? It's like 10 feet tall, and you can't really go around it one way or the other, and you end up trying to throw a little tomahawk or something like that over the top. Well, spike Hyzer is a great way to get over objects like that, and you don't have to have a huge arm to do it. The key to it is to throw up, and that's the biggest factor with a spike. Is you kind of take your normal motion, of throwing a disc straight across your chest, and you modify it just a little bit. And instead of throwing a disc across your chest, you want to reach almost down to the ground like you're handing it to somebody that's sitting down. And then when you pull through, you don't pull through straight, you pull through up. The key to a spike is height. You want the right height. And so once you learn how to throw the disc up in the air, it's going to be very accurate for you. One of the things that it takes out of line is wind a lot. Wind will affect it, but you don't have to worry about wind getting underneath the disc and really pushing it and carrying it off somewhere. It's pretty much going to go straight up and straight down. So once you learn to dial it in, it's really useful tool for upshots. A lot of people, myself included, I'll use it on 110-foot upshots on windy days, wide open hole. Because I'm afraid that disc at the angle of the ground or whatever is going to flip and flutter on me. So I take that spike disc and I throw it at an almost vertical angle. When it comes to the ground, it just hits and stops like that instead of landing and skipping off. So those are two very, very useful shots that you guys can learn. We'll work on some of that with you guys when we're done here. I'll give you some examples real quick just to let you see. So first off, I'm going to throw just some basic Hyzers at hole one's basket over there. So I'm going to try to hit Brian Lamoureux. We'll see how, we'll see how that goes. What I'm going to use here is I've got a couple of dynamic disc felons and a Latitude 64 XXX. Basically very similar discs. Again, the key to throwing just a straight Hyzer, like I said, you want about 10 feet in the air on an angle. You don't really want to throw it super flat, and you don't want to try to turn it. So on an angle, keep that same motion that you've learned your whole life of pulling the disc across your chest and all that stuff, but just maybe tweak the angle up just a hair to get that disc to float and then come back in. So let me throw a couple for you and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Where I'm aiming at here, you can see the little white tree with the fork in it, about 10 feet off the ground in the back, about 30 feet right of the basket. That's what I'm aiming at. And I want to be about at the tree limb level when I do it. That was a little low. You see the nice consistent turn that it gets, and it comes in and stops. Now again, I can throw a straight shot, but it's much easier for me to control the distance at this point with the wind doing what it's doing right here. So let me try one more and get a little higher. That's about what I'm looking for right there. Minus the tree, that would have been right on the basket. So that's what you want in a Hyzer. When you go out and practice this, look for distances. Get in your mind, okay, if I throw it 80% on a kind of an angle like that, it's going to go this far. That way when you're on the course and you were faced with a shot like that, oh, I've done this before. I know if I throw the disc 80%, 30 feet right or 30 feet left, depending on which arm you throw with, it's going to land within a small circle of the basket. And that's a pro tip. A lot of pros throw high percentage shots. They don't really run at baskets. They throw high percentage shots. And a Hyzer is a very high percentage shot. A couple spike Hyzers for you, just to show you the difference. You probably saw how those floated a little bit to the left. They kind of, the wind got underneath them a little bit and they just carried real nicely. Let's say I don't want it to do that. I want it to go up and down and stop. That's where a spike Hyzer is more useful, because you can tweak your angle just a little bit, but by throwing the disc straight up in the air and trying to get it really high, it makes that overstable disc actually dive into the ground. Kind of think of an airplane crashing, if you will. If they dive into the ground, they go straight into the ground. There's no floating down and skipping up. And so for a spike hyzer, what I'm going to try to do is probably land a little short of the trees and watch what happens to the disc when it hits the ground. You won't see it skip like the other ones did. You see the nice big spike angle, and it's going to come down and hit and stop. So it's something that is very easy to learn. It really is, even if you don't throw that far. It's something that's very easy to learn to get up and down very effectively. One more thing to mention, you know, if the air gets underneath the disc, it's going to push it right, or in my case, push it right. Or if the air gets on the top of the disc, it's going to slam it down. And you'll learn that too. So based on which way the wind's moving, you'll know how far right or left to throw it. Because again, it's usually easier for you to judge distance right to left than it is front to back, if that makes sense. It's easier to get a disc to stop right to left than it is front to back. So I'm going to throw one more, and just to give you guys another example. You see it's got that big spike motion. Of course I hit a tree, but but it's going to come down and hit and dig. And so that's a really important thing to learn. That's your pro tip kind of for the day for me, is learn spike hyzers, learn hyzers. Don't have to have a big arm to throw it, like I said. Get out there, try it, learn it. It's really going to help you be a lot more consistent and reduce your scores in the long run. So thanks, guys.